Sarah Crowley kneels in the dirt behind her shed, scraping dried blood from beneath her fingernails with a rusted knife. The blade catches morning light as she works, each stroke deliberate and careful. Her hands shake despite her efforts to steady them. 3 days in the wilderness have left their mark on her fingers, under her nails, in the creases of her palms. The blood has turned the color of rust, stubborn and dark against her pale skin. The shed door hangs open behind her, revealing the workspace that has become her sanctuary. Pelts stretch across wooden frames like ghosts frozen mid-scream. Fox, rabbit, deer, animals she has cleaned and prepared for 30 years, since she was 16 and learning the trade from her grandmother. The makeshift bed in the corner tells a different story, blankets twisted and stained. A pillow that smells of fear and sleepless nights. This is where she has been hiding for 3 days, ever since she returned from the mountains with blood that is not her own. The knife slips, nicking her thumb. Fresh blood wells up, bright red against the dried brown beneath her nail. She does not flinch. Pain has become a familiar companion these past weeks, ever since Tommy died in the mine shaft that should have been safe. Ever since the questions started and the answers stopped making sense. You came back. Sheriff Dalton's voice cuts through the morning air like a blade through leather. Sarah does not look up from her work. She continues scraping, methodical and patient. She has learned that patience is the only weapon she has left against men who think they own the world. Didn't have much choice. Folks been worried. Asking questions. Sarah finally pauses in her work. The knife hovers over her thumbnail where a crescent of blood still clings. She can feel Dalton watching her, measuring her responses like a man weighing gold dust. What kind of questions? The kind that make me nervous. Sarah raises her eyes for the first time since he arrived. Sheriff Dalton stands 10 feet away, close enough to see the details of her face, but far enough to draw his weapon if needed. His hand rests on his gun like a man who has forgotten he is wearing it. Behind him, dust rises from the main road where his cruiser idles, engine running. He is not planning to stay long. This is not a social call. Dalton is 53 years old and has been sheriff for 22 years. His father held the badge before him, and his grandfather before that. 3 generations of Daltons keeping the peace in a county where peace is a fragile thing, bought and sold like everything else. Sarah has known him since she was a child, but the man standing in her yard is not the same one who used to buy fresh venison from her father. This man has secrets behind his eyes. You find what you are looking for out there, Sarah? The question hangs in the air between them. Sarah returns to her fingernails, scraping away the evidence of whatever happened in the mountains. Whatever brought her back changed and hollow-eyed, sleeping in a shed instead of her own bed. Maybe that blood fresh. Sarah's hand stills for just a moment before resuming its work. The question is casual, but nothing about this conversation is casual. Dalton has noticed the blood, cataloged it, filed it away in the part of his mind that thinks like a lawman instead of a neighbor. Rabbit. Show me the rabbit. Sarah stands slowly, brushing dirt from her knees. Her legs are stiff from kneeling, from 3 days of sleeping on a thin mattress that belongs in a hunting cabin, not a home. She folds the knife and slips it into her back pocket. The weight of it is comforting against her hip. Ate it. Bones? Buried them. Where? Sarah looks at him directly now, studying his face for tells. Dalton has always been easy to read, but this morning his expression is carefully neutral. This is Sheriff Dalton asking questions, not Bill Dalton who bought Tommy drinks at the tavern every Friday night. Does it matter? Dalton steps closer, his boots crushing dried grass. The morning is still cool, but sweat beads on his forehead. He is nervous about something, and nervous men make mistakes. Sarah has learned to watch for mistakes, to store them away for later use. Everything matters now. You know that. The words carry weight beyond their simple meaning. Everything matters now. Since Tommy died, since the mine inspection that found nothing wrong, since the insurance company paid out without question, since Sarah started asking the questions that no one wanted to answer, Sarah studies Dalton's face, searching for cracks in his carefully constructed facade. She finds them in the tightness around his eyes, the way his jaw clenches when he thinks she is not looking. Bill Dalton was Tommy's friend. Sheriff Dalton is something else entirely. How long you planning to stay out here, Sarah? Long as it takes. Takes for what? Sarah does not answer immediately. Inside the shed, her grandmother's tools hang on wooden pegs like instruments in a surgeon's kit. Knives for skinning, needles for sewing, stretchers for drying, tools for taking apart what was once alive and making it useful again. The irony is not lost on her. To figure things out. What things? Things that don't make sense. Dalton shifts his weight from one foot to the other. His hand moves closer to his gun, an unconscious gesture that Sarah files away for future reference. She has been cataloging such gestures for 3 weeks now, since the morning they told her Tommy was dead. Sometimes things don't need to make sense. Sometimes they just are. Not this time. Sarah, you're walking a dangerous line here. What line is that? The line between grieving widow and troublemaker. The words hit like a physical blow. Sarah feels her face flush with anger, but she keeps her voice level. Anger is another luxury she cannot afford, not when men with badges and guns are asking questions about blood under her fingernails. Is that what you think I am? A troublemaker? I think you're a woman who lost her husband and is looking for someone to blame. I'm looking for the truth. Truth is Tommy's dead. Accident at the mine. Case closed. Sarah laughs. A sound without humor. The laugh echoes off the shed walls and seems to hang in the air longer than it should. In the distance, a crow calls from the fence post where Tommy used to sit and watch her work. Case closed. Just like that. Just like that. And the blood under my fingernails? Rabbit blood, like you said. Sarah nods slowly, as if accepting his words, but her eyes never leave his face. Never stop cataloging the small signs of deception that leak through his professional mask. Anything else you need to know, Sheriff? Dalton hesitates, and in that hesitation, Sarah sees something that chills her more than the mountain cold ever could. Fear. Sheriff Dalton is afraid of her, or afraid of what she might know, or afraid of what she might do with that knowledge. Stay out of trouble, Sarah. I'll do my best. Dalton turns and walks back toward his cruiser, his boots leaving deep prints in the soft earth. Sarah watches him go, memorizing the set of his shoulders, the way he favors his left leg, the speed of his retreat. Everything is information now. Everything matters. The cruiser door slams with a sound like a gunshot. The engine revs and dust billows as Dalton drives away, leaving Sarah alone with her shed full of pelts and her hands full of secrets. She looks down at her fingernails, still stained despite her efforts. Some blood, she realizes, is harder to wash away than others. Inside the shed, Tommy's jacket still hangs on its peg, waiting for him to come home. Sarah walks past Dalton toward the shed, her boots crunching on dried grass. He doesn't stop her, but she can feel his eyes tracking her movement like a hunter watching prey. The morning air carries the scent of wood smoke from the neighbor's chimney and the deeper smell of earth turned cold by autumn. She keeps her pace steady, refusing to let him see how his presence unsettles her. Need to ask you about Tommy again. Sarah's hand pauses on the shed door handle. The wood is rough beneath her palm, weathered by 20 years of mountain storms. She doesn't turn around to face him. Asked me plenty already. New information came up. The words hit her like a physical blow. Sarah freezes in the doorway, her body going rigid. Inside the shed, shadows stretch across the floor where morning light fails to reach. Tommy's hunting rifle still leans against the wall where he left it that last morning, 3 weeks ago. Before the accident, that wasn't an accident. The rifle is a .30-06 that belonged to his father, clean and oiled and ready for deer season that Tommy will never see. What kind of information? Sarah's voice comes out steadier than she feels. Behind her, she hears Dalton's boots shifting on gravel. He is nervous about something, and that makes her nervous too. Nervous men ask dangerous questions. The kind that says you might know more than you told us. Sarah turns slowly, her hand still gripping the door handle. Dalton stands 15 feet away, close enough for conversation, but far enough to react if she makes any sudden moves. His uniform is pressed and clean, but there are dark circles under his eyes that speak of sleepless nights. She wonders what keeps Sheriff Dalton awake these days. Tommy's dead. What more you need to know? How he died. The question hangs in the air between them like smoke from a gun barrel. Sarah studies his face, looking for tells. Dalton has never been good at hiding his emotions, not since they were children, and he would cry when the other boys picked fights with him at school. Equipment malfunction. You wrote the report. I wrote what I was told to write. The admission falls from his lips like a stone into still water. Sarah feels something shift inside her chest, a loosening of tension she didn't know she was carrying. For 3 weeks, she has been questioning her own memory, wondering if grief had twisted her perception of events. Now she knows her instincts were right. Who told you? Dalton looks away, focusing on something past her shoulder. His jaw works like he is chewing words he cannot swallow. You know who. Say his name. Can't do that. Sarah releases the door handle and takes a step toward him. Dalton's hand moves instinctively toward his gun, then stops. Even he knows how this looks, a sheriff drawing on a grieving widow in her own yard. Then get off my property. Dalton doesn't move. His feet remain planted like he has grown roots in her driveway. Behind him, his cruiser idles with the patient rumble of an engine that has been running too long. The exhaust creates small clouds in the cool air. Sarah, Tommy said something before he died. Emergency dispatch caught it on tape. Partial transmission. Sarah's chest tightens like someone has wrapped wire around her ribs and pulled. She remembers Tommy's final words, spoken not into a radio, but directly to her as she held his broken body in the mine shaft. Words whispered against her ear as his blood soaked into her shirt. Words no one else should know because no one else was there when he died. What did the tape say? Her voice sounds strange in her own ears, hollow and distant. Inside the shed, Tommy's presence feels stronger than it has since the funeral. She can almost see him leaning against the workbench, cleaning his rifle and talking about the deer sign he found up by Miller's Creek. Something about the Hendricks family, something about 50 years of lies. The world tilts sideways for a moment. Sarah grabs the door frame to steady herself, her knuckles white against the weathered wood. The Hendricks family owns the mine where Tommy died. They own half the businesses in town and most of the elected officials. They have owned this county for 3 generations, ever since old Samuel Hendricks struck silver in the mountains and used the money to buy everything that mattered. That's impossible. Why? Because Tommy never made it to his radio. The words escape before she can stop them. Dalton's expression changes, sharpening like a blade being honed. She has said too much. Revealed knowledge she should not possess. How would you know that? Sarah's mind races, looking for safe ground in a conversation that has become a minefield. Every word now carries weight that could crush her if she missteps. I found him. After. Found him where? In the mine. Where else? Report says you weren't at the mine that day. Report's wrong about a lot of things. Dalton takes a step closer. His shadow falls across the shed doorway, blocking some of the light that illuminates Tommy's rifle. Sarah finds herself calculating distances, measuring the space between her and the weapon that could change the balance of this conversation. Sarah, I need you to tell me exactly what happened that day. Why? So you can write another false report, so I can figure out how deep this goes. The admission surprises her. She looks at Dalton's face again, searching for deception but finding only exhaustion and something that might be regret. Sheriff Dalton has been carrying secrets, and the weight of them is showing. You really don't know, do you? Know what? How they killed him. The words hang between them like a curse. Dalton's face goes pale and his hand moves away from his gun. For the first time since he arrived, he looks like the boy she grew up with instead of the badge he wears. Sarah, what are you saying? I'm saying Tommy didn't die in an accident. Then how? Sarah looks past him toward the main road, where dust still hangs in the air from his arrival. No other cars are visible, but that doesn't mean they aren't coming. The Hendricks family has eyes everywhere in this county, and ears that hear things they shouldn't. Tommy found something in the mine, something old, something that would have destroyed the Hendricks family if it came to light. What kind of something? The kind that gets people killed. Dalton runs a hand through his hair, disturbing the careful part he maintains for official business. When he speaks again, his voice has lost its professional edge. How long have you known? Since the day I pulled his body out of that shaft. Why didn't you tell me? Because I wasn't sure who I could trust. And now, Sarah considers the question. Trust is a luxury she cannot afford, not when powerful men are rewriting history to protect their secrets. But Dalton's admission about the false report has shifted something between them. Now I'm thinking maybe you're as trapped as I am. Dalton nods slowly, like a man acknowledging a truth he has been avoiding. When he speaks, his voice is barely above a whisper. The tape isn't from emergency dispatch. Where's it from? Hendricks Family Security, Private Frequency. The revelation hits Sarah like ice water. If the Hendricks family has recordings of Tommy's final moments, then they know exactly what he discovered in the mine. They know what he told her before he died, and they know she is the only person left who can expose the truth. How long before they come for me? Dalton looks at his watch, then back at her face. His expression is grim. They're already on their way. That tape doesn't exist. Sarah's voice is steady, but her hands betray her. They curl into fists at her sides, knuckles white with tension that has nowhere to go. The morning air feels thinner suddenly, like the pressure has dropped before a storm. How would you know? Dalton's question carries an edge of suspicion that cuts through the space between them. Sarah can see him putting pieces together in his mind, connecting dots that form a picture he doesn't want to see. Because Tommy never made it to his radio. The words hang in the air like smoke. Dalton's expression shifts, his professional mask slipping to reveal something raw underneath. Understanding dawns in his eyes, followed quickly by something that looks like fear. You were there. It's not a question. Sarah doesn't confirm or deny, but her silence speaks louder than words. She watches Dalton process this new information, watches him realize that everything he's been told is a lie built on top of other lies. I found him after. Report says equipment malfunction. Collapsed beam. Report's wrong. Sarah's voice carries a finality that makes Dalton flinch. He runs a hand over his face, suddenly looking older than his 53 years. The weight of 22 years wearing a badge in a corrupt county is showing in the lines around his eyes. Then tell me what really happened. Sarah opens her mouth to answer, but movement on the main road catches her eye. A black sedan has joined Dalton's cruiser, its engine ticking as it cools. Through the windshield, she can see the outline of a man in an expensive hat. The kind of hat that costs more than most people in this county make in a month. Company's coming. Dalton follows her gaze. His jaw tightens when he sees the sedan, and a string of profanity escapes his lips. Shit. The word carries 20 years of frustration and compromise. Sarah watches his face as he recognizes the vehicle, sees the exact moment when Sheriff Dalton realizes his carefully balanced world is about to collapse. Time for you to choose sides, Sheriff. Already have. The admission surprises her. Sarah studies his face, looking for deception but finding only resignation. Dalton has made his choice, and it shows in the way his hand moves away from his gun, the way his shoulders straighten like a man preparing for battle. The sedan's engine cuts off with a soft click. Car doors slam in rapid succession, the sound echoing off the shed walls like gunshots. Two men approach across the gravel driveway, their footsteps measured and deliberate. One young and nervous, constantly adjusting his tie and checking his watch. One older with silver hair and cold eyes that have seen too much and forgotten nothing. Robert Hendricks and his son Marcus, the family that owns half the county and controls the other half through fear, money, and carefully placed favors. 3 generations of Hendricks men have ruled this territory like feudal lords, and they have no intention of letting that change. Morning, Sarah, Robert calls out. Heard you were back. His voice carries the artificial warmth of a politician greeting voters. Sarah steps fully into the shed's shadow, positioning herself where the morning light won't silhouette her movements. From here, she can reach Tommy's rifle in 2 steps. The weight of that knowledge steadies her nerves. Mr. Hendricks. She keeps her voice neutral, giving nothing away. Robert Hendricks is 71 years old and has been the most powerful man in the county for 40 of those years. He didn't build that power by missing subtle cues or underestimating opponents. Mind if we talk? About what? Your husband's accident. The word accident comes out like he's tasting something bitter. Sarah can see Marcus shifting nervously behind his father, his hand hovering near the inside of his jacket where a shoulder holster would rest. Nothing to discuss. Marcus steps forward, his youth making him impatient in a way his father has long since learned to control. He has his mother's weak chin and his father's cold eyes, a combination that makes him dangerous in petty ways. Actually, there is. See, we found something that belonged to Tommy, something he shouldn't have had. Sarah's pulse quickens, but she keeps her expression blank. Tommy never told her exactly what he found in the mine, only that it was enough to destroy the Hendricks family if it came to light. Something old, something hidden for decades. Don't know what you're talking about. Robert raises a hand, silencing his son with a gesture that speaks of years of practiced authority. When he speaks, his voice carries the weight of money and influence. Sarah, let's not play games. We're all adults here. Are we? The question hangs between them like a challenge. Robert's smile doesn't reach his eyes, and Sarah can see the calculation behind his pleasant facade. He is measuring her, deciding how much of a threat she represents. Tommy took something from mine office records, something that doesn't belong to him. Tommy's dead. Yes, he is. And we're all very sorry for your loss. The condolences sound hollow, coming from the man who ordered her husband's death. Sarah can feel anger building in her chest, hot and dangerous. Anger is a luxury she cannot afford, not when she is outnumbered 3-1. What do you want? We want our property back. What property? Marcus takes another step forward, his patience finally snapping. His father shoots him a warning look, but the young man is too agitated to notice. Don't act stupid. You know what he took. Marcus, Robert's voice carries a warning that makes his son step back. Sarah, my son is upset. He's not thinking clearly. Seems to be thinking fine to me. Robert's mask slips for just a moment, revealing the predator underneath. When he speaks again, his voice has lost its artificial warmth. Where are the documents? Sarah? What documents? The ones Tommy stole from the mine office. The ones he died trying to protect. The admission hangs in the air like a confession. Robert Hendricks has just confirmed that Tommy's death was murder, not accident. Sarah files this information away, knowing she may need it later. I don't know anything about documents. I think you do. Dalton clears his throat, reminding everyone that he is still present. When he speaks, his voice carries an authority that surprises Sarah. Mr. Hendricks, this is beginning to sound like a threat. Robert turns to face the sheriff, his expression shifting to one of mild disappointment, like a father correcting a disobedient child. Sheriff Dalton, I'm surprised to see you here. Just doing my job. Are you? Because your job is to maintain order in this county, not to interfere with private business. Murder isn't private business. The word murder falls like a stone into still water. Marcus's hand moves closer to his jacket, and Sarah shifts her weight toward the rifle. The morning air feels charged with electricity, like the moment before lightning strikes. That's a serious accusation, Sheriff. It's a serious crime. Robert's laugh is cold and empty. He reaches into his jacket pocket and pulls out a folded envelope, yellowed with age. Sarah, this is what your husband stole. Care to see what was worth dying for? Sarah's eyes lock on the envelope. Whatever is inside has been important enough to kill for, important enough to cover up for decades, important enough to bring the most powerful family in the county to her doorstep. Show me. Robert's smile returns, sharp as a blade. I thought you might be interested. What did you find? Sarah's question carries an edge that makes Marcus step back like he's been slapped. His nervous energy shifts into something closer to fear as he glances between his father and the woman standing in the shadow of her shed. Robert continues forward, each step measured and deliberate, pulling a dirt-stained envelope from his jacket with the careful precision of a man handling evidence. Letters, old ones, from the mine office. The envelope is yellowed with age, its edges soft from years of handling. Sarah can see faded ink bleeding through the paper, writing that belongs to another era when different men made different choices about life and death in these mountains. Those belong to me now. Actually, they belong to my family. Always have. Robert's voice carries the certainty of a man who has never been denied anything he wanted. 3 generations of Hendricks men have built their empire on the assumption that ownership extends beyond property to people, to truth, to the very history of this county. Sarah looks at Dalton, searching his face for some sign of support. The sheriff stands frozen between his duty and his survival, his hand hovering near his weapon, but his eyes fixed on the ground. He won't meet her gaze, and that tells her everything she needs to know about where his loyalties lie. Sheriff, you going to let them steal from a widow? Sarah, answer me. The demand cuts through the morning air like a whip crack. Dalton flinches, finally raising his eyes to meet hers. What she sees there isn't law or justice or protection. It's surrender. Robert laughs, a sound like gravel sliding down a mountainside. The laugh echoes off the shed walls and seems to hang in the air longer than it should, carrying decades of arrogance and unopposed power. Sheriff Dalton works for the county. County works for me. Simple as that. The admission is delivered without shame or hesitation. This is how the world works in Robert Hendrick's mind. A clear hierarchy where money and influence trump law and justice every time. Dalton's face flushes red, but he doesn't contradict the statement. Tommy died for those letters. Sarah's voice cuts through Robert's confidence like a blade finding flesh. The old man's smile falters for just a moment before reasserting itself, but that moment of uncertainty gives Sarah hope. Tommy died because he went places he shouldn't have gone. Asked questions he shouldn't have asked. Tommy died because your family's been covering up murder for 50 years. The words hang in the air like smoke from a gun barrel. Marcus reaches for his weapon, his hand moving inside his jacket with practiced speed, but Robert stops him with a raised hand. The gesture speaks of years of control, decades of managing crises through careful calculation rather than hasty violence. Careful, Sarah. That sounds like an accusation. It is. Prove it. The challenge hangs between them like a gauntlet thrown down in the dirt. Sarah steps out of the shed's shadow, moving into the morning light where all three men can see her clearly. In her hand, she holds a small tape recorder, ancient and battered, but functional, the kind of device that belonged to another era, when people still believed in the permanence of recorded truth. Tommy's final words weren't about your lies. They were his confession, about what he found in the mine, about what your grandfather did to the families who tried to organize, about the bodies. Robert's composure cracks like ice under pressure. His carefully maintained mask slips, revealing something raw and desperate underneath. For the first time since arriving, he looks like a man who might lose everything. That's impossible. Tommy had 30 minutes before he died, plenty of time to record everything. Sarah's thumb hovers over the play button. The tape recorder sits in her palm like a weapon more dangerous than any gun. Truth has a way of destroying empires that bullets cannot touch. Your grandfather Samuel didn't build this empire with silver money. He built it with blood. Marcus shifts nervously, his hand still inside his jacket. Dad, we should go. Shut up. Robert's command silences his son instantly. The old man's eyes never leave Sarah's face, studying her like a predator evaluating prey. He is calculating odds, measuring risks, deciding how much truth he can afford to let survive. You don't know what you're dealing with, Sarah. I know exactly what I'm dealing with. Murder, conspiracy, 50 years of families wondering what happened to their fathers and sons. Those men were troublemakers, outsiders trying to destroy what my grandfather built. Those men were trying to form a union, trying to get safe working conditions and fair wages. Same thing. The admission slips out before Robert can stop it. Sarah sees the exact moment when he realizes his mistake. When 71 years of careful control crack under the pressure of defending the indefensible. Play the tape, Sarah. Dalton's voice surprises everyone. The sheriff has found his backbone at the worst possible moment, and Sarah can see Robert recalculating the variables in his equation of power. Sheriff, I would strongly advise, play it. Sarah presses the button. Tommy's voice fills the morning air, weak but clear, speaking from beyond the grave with the authority of a dying man who has nothing left to lose. The Hendricks family killed 12 men in 1974, buried them in Shaft 7, made it look like a cave-in. Sarah, if something happens to me, you take this too. Robert signals Marcus with a sharp gesture. His son draws his gun in one smooth motion, the weapon appearing in his hand like magic. The barrel points directly at Sarah's chest, unwavering despite the tremor in his hand. Turn it off. Sarah's thumb moves away from the stop button. Tommy's voice continues, growing stronger as if death has given him courage he never possessed in life. Found the real payroll records. 12 men who quit the day before the union vote. Same 12 men listed as casualties in the cave-in 3 days later. Samuel Hendricks had them killed and buried to stop the union. I said, turn it off. Marcus's voice cracks with stress. Sarah can see sweat beading on his forehead, despite the cool morning air. Killing an unarmed woman in broad daylight wasn't part of his plan when he woke up this morning. Bodies are still down there. Shaft 7, Level 3, sealed off after the supposed cave-in. Nobody's been down there in 50 years. Dalton draws his weapon, pointing it at Marcus. The morning has become a three-way standoff, with Sarah holding the truth that could destroy everything the Hendricks family has built. "Put the gun down, son. Sheriff, you're making a mistake." "Already made my mistake. Not making another one." Tommy's voice grows fainter as the tape nears its end, but his words carry the weight of absolute truth. "Sarah, promise me you'll bring them home. Promise me their families will know what happened." The recording clicks to silence. 4 people stand in a rural yard, surrounded by the ghosts of 12 men who died for wanting better lives. The truth hangs in the air like a storm cloud, ready to break open and wash away 50 years of carefully constructed lies. Robert Hendricks looks at the tape recorder in Sarah's hand and knows his empire is about to fall. "Put the gun down, Marcus." Dalton's voice cuts through the tension like a blade through skin. His own weapon is drawn, the service pistol steady in his hands and pointed directly at Robert's son. 22 years of wearing a badge has taught him how to hold a gun without shaking, how to mean what he says when he says it. "Sheriff, you're making a mistake," Robert says. His voice carries the authority of a man who has never been contradicted by law enforcement in this county. 3 generations of Hendricks men have bought and paid for every badge, every judge, every decision that mattered. But something has shifted in the morning air, something that makes his usual confidence sound hollow. "Made my mistake 50 years ago when I chose to look the other way. Not making it again." Dalton's admission hangs between them like a confession spoken in church. His finger rests on the trigger with the certainty of a man who has finally found his moral center after decades of compromise and cowardice. Sarah keeps the recorder running, Tommy's voice continuing to spill truth into the morning air like blood from an open wound. The dead man's words carry more authority than any living voice in this standoff. "Found the pay stubs. 12 families who disappeared the week before the union vote. They're still down there, Sarah, in the dark." Tommy's voice grows weaker with each word, but his message is clear. 50 years of silence is ending in this moment, in this yard, with these 4 people holding the future of an entire county in their hands. Marcus's hand shakes like a leaf in a storm. The gun wavers in his grip, and sweat runs down his face despite the cool morning air. Killing was supposed to be clean and distant, ordered from behind closed doors and carried out by professionals. This is too close, too personal, too real. "Dad, what do we do?" The question comes out like a plea. Marcus is 32 years old, but in this moment, he sounds like a child asking his father to fix something that cannot be fixed. Robert's expression hardens with the resolve of a man who has spent his entire life protecting what his grandfather built. "What we've always done. Clean up the mess." Robert reaches into his jacket with the smooth motion of a man who has carried weapons for protection since he was old enough to understand that power makes enemies. Sarah sees the movement and knows she has seconds before everything changes forever. She dives for Tommy's rifle as gunshots explode across the yard like thunder rolling down from the mountains. The sound echoes off the shed walls and seems to go on forever, drowning out Tommy's recorded voice and the sound of her own breathing. Dalton fires first, his training overriding 50 years of looking the other way. The bullet catches Marcus in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending his own shot wide. The young man's bullet shatters the shed's window, sending glass cascading to the ground like frozen tears. Sarah comes up with the rifle, chambered and ready. Tommy's weapon feels familiar in her hands, weighted with memories of autumn mornings when they hunted together in the mountains above town. She worked the bolt action smooth and sure, the muscle memory of 30 years speaking louder than fear. "Drop it, Robert." Her voice is steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. The rifle's barrel points directly at Robert Hendricks's chest, and for the first time in his 71 years, the most powerful man in the county is looking down the wrong end of a gun. You won't shoot an unarmed man. Robert's weapon has fallen from his hand, lost somewhere in the chaos of gunfire and confusion. He stands empty-handed but not defenseless, protected by decades of assumption that violence is something that happens to other people. Tommy was unarmed. Tommy was a threat to this family's legacy, to this county's stability. Robert's voice carries no remorse, no acknowledgement that 12 families lost fathers and sons to protect his grandfather's empire. In his mind, the mathematics are simple. 12 lives against decades of prosperity and order. Tommy was my husband. Tommy was a fool who couldn't leave well enough alone. The words hit Sarah like physical blows. She can feel Tommy's presence beside her, his voice whispering encouragement from whatever place the dead occupy when justice calls them back to witness the settling of accounts. Sarah's finger finds the trigger, resting against the cold metal with the weight of every choice that has led to this moment. The world narrows to the space between her and Robert Hendricks, to the distance a bullet would travel to end 50 years of lies and murder. She can see Tommy in her peripheral vision, not as memory, but as presence. He stands beside the shed where his jacket still hangs on its peg, where his boots still wait by the door. His face carries the peace of a man who has spoken his truth and waits for justice to follow. "Sarah," Dalton calls softly. "There's another way." His voice breaks through the tunnel vision of revenge, reminding her that she is not alone in this moment. The sheriff has chosen his side, finally and completely, and that choice changes everything about what happens next. What way? Her question comes out as a whisper, but in the silence that follows gunfire, whispers carry like shouts. Marcus sits in the dirt, clutching his wounded shoulder, his face pale with shock and pain. Blood seeps between his fingers, bright red against his expensive shirt. Let the truth speak for itself. On the recorder, Tommy's voice grows weaker as the tape nears its end, but his words carry the authority of a dying man who has nothing left to lose and everything to give. The families deserve to know. Their children deserve to know. "Sarah, promise me you'll bring them home. Promise me their stories won't die with me. Promise me."
The recording cuts to static, then silence. Tommy's final words disappear into the electronic void, leaving only the sound of breathing and the distant hum of insects in the morning grass. Sarah keeps the rifle trained on Robert Hendricks, but her finger moves away from the trigger. In the sudden quiet, she can hear her own heartbeat, can feel the weight of decision settling on her shoulders like snow.
Robert straightens his jacket with shaking hands, trying to regain some dignity in defeat. His empire is crumbling around him, 50 years of careful construction undone by a dead man's voice and a widow's courage. "You have no idea what you've destroyed." "I know exactly what I've destroyed. Lies, murder, 50 years of families not knowing where their fathers are buried." Dalton keeps his weapon trained on Marcus, but his eyes are on Sarah. He is waiting for her decision, ready to follow her lead for the first time in his career as sheriff. "Sarah, what do you want to do?" The question hangs in the air like smoke. What does she want? Justice for Tommy? Revenge for the 12 men buried in Shaft 7? Or something else entirely? Something that honors the dead without adding to their number? She thinks of Tommy's final words. His plea for the families to know the truth. Killing Robert Hendricks will not bring back the dead or heal the wounds his family has inflicted on this county. But truth might begin that healing. "I want to go to the mine." "Sarah, I want to see Shaft 7. I want to bring them home." Sarah lowers the rifle slowly, her decision made. Justice is not always about pulling triggers. Sometimes it is about opening graves and speaking names that have been forgotten for too long. Robert Hendricks watches his world end with the quiet dignity of a man who has always known this day would come. In the distance, sirens wail as backup arrives too late to change anything that matters. The reckoning hour has passed, and truth has won. "Promise him what, Sarah?" Robert's voice is desperate now. Stripped of the authority that has carried him through 71 years of unopposed power, Marcus sits in the dirt, clutching his wounded shoulder, blood seeping between his fingers like secrets finally coming to light. The morning air carries the copper scent of violence and the bitter taste of truth. "Promise him I'd bring them home." Sarah lowers the rifle slightly, but keeps it ready. Her hands are steady now, steadied by purpose and the weight of 12 families who have waited 50 years for answers. Behind Robert, dust clouds rise from the main road as more vehicles approach at high speed. You can't prove anything with that recording. Robert's words carry less conviction than they did 5 minutes ago. He can hear the sirens growing closer, can see the end of his family's empire approaching like a storm he cannot control or redirect. Don't have to. Bodies speak louder than words. "Those men died in an accident. My grandfather filed the proper reports." "Your grandfather filed false reports." Tommy found the real ones. Sarah backs toward the shed, keeping the rifle trained on Robert while reaching for something behind her. Her movements are careful and deliberate, the actions of a woman who has planned for this moment since the day she pulled Tommy's broken body from the mine shaft. She pulls out a metal box, dented and stained with age, the kind of box that belongs in an office safe, not hidden in a widow's shed. Tommy died retrieving this from the mine office, carrying it with him into the darkness where the Hendricks family thought their secrets would stay buried forever. 12 families, 12 breadwinners who disappeared the night before the union vote, all listed as quit without notice in your grandfather's files, but the county coroner logged them as casualties 3 days later. Sarah opens the box with one hand, spilling documents across the ground like evidence at a crime scene. Payroll records, safety reports, correspondence between mine bosses and local officials. 50 years of carefully constructed lies exposed to morning sunlight. State police cruisers slide to a stop in clouds of gravel and dust. Officers emerge with weapons drawn but not aimed, their training evident in the way they assess the scene and establish positions. This is not their first standoff. And they know the difference between active threats and situations already under control. Detective Morrison steps forward, a woman in her 40s with the weathered face of someone who has seen too much truth in dark places. Sarah recognizes her from Tommy's funeral, where she stood in the back, asking quiet questions that no one wanted to answer. "Mrs. Crowley, we've been looking for you." "I've been busy." Morrison's eyes take in the scene with professional precision. Marcus bleeding in the dirt, Robert standing over scattered documents, Dalton with his weapon still drawn and pointed at the wounded man. This is not what she expected to find when she answered Dalton's radio call. "We need to talk about your husband's death." "Already am." Morrison looks at the tape recorder in Sarah's hand, still running and capturing every word spoken in this yard, where 50 years of lies are finally dying. She recognizes the significance of the moment, the way truth has a habit of surfacing when people least expect it. "Is that the recording Sheriff Dalton mentioned?" Sarah nods, her thumb still hovering over the stop button. Tommy's voice has gone silent, but his words continue to echo in the morning air like ghost voices calling from the depths of Shaft 7. Tommy's last gift to the families who never got to bury their dead. Morrison signals her officers to secure the scene while she approaches the scattered documents. Her trained eye immediately recognizes the significance of what she is seeing. Evidence of conspiracy, murder, and cover-up spanning multiple decades. We'll need everything. The recorder, the documents. Your statement. "What about them?" Sarah indicates the Hendricks men with a slight gesture of her rifle. "They'll be coming with us." The words hit Robert like physical blows. For the first time in his life, someone with real authority is telling him what will happen instead of asking for his permission. The empire his grandfather built is crumbling in real time, and there is nothing his money or influence can do to stop it. Robert straightens his jacket with shaking hands, trying to regain some dignity in the face of inevitable defeat. His voice carries the hollow ring of a man who knows his words no longer matter. "You have no idea what you're destroying. This family built this county, provided jobs, stability. Built it on graves." Sarah interrupts. "Tommy's just the latest." Morrison crouches beside the documents, photographing each page with the methodical precision of someone who understands that evidence must be preserved exactly as found. The papers tell a story of systematic murder disguised as industrial accident, of families torn apart to protect corporate profits. "Mrs. Crowley, how long have you had these documents?" "Since the day Tommy died. He hid them before he went into the mine that last time." "He knew he was in danger?" "He knew what he'd found, what it meant." Marcus groans from his position in the dirt, pain and shock combining to make him pale and nauseous. An officer applies pressure to his wound while calling for medical assistance, treating him with the professional care due any injured person regardless of their crimes. "I need a doctor," Marcus whispers. "You need a lawyer," Morrison replies without looking up from the documents. Robert watches his son bleeding in the dirt and seems to age 10 years in 10 seconds. The weight of his family's crimes is finally settling on his shoulders, and the burden is heavier than he ever imagined it would be. "This won't hold up in court. That recording is inadmissible. Hearsay from a dead man." Morrison stands, brushing dirt from her knees. Her expression is grim but satisfied, the look of a detective who has finally found the missing pieces of a puzzle that has been haunting her for weeks. Maybe, but these documents aren't hearsay. Neither are the bodies we're going to find in Shaft 7. The admission that they will excavate the mine hits Robert like a death sentence. For 50 years, his family has counted on the darkness to keep their secrets. Now, light is coming to places that have known only shadow. You can't do that. The mine is private property. Was private property. As of this morning, it's a crime scene. Sarah hands the tape recorder to Morrison but keeps the rifle ready. Trust is something she will rebuild slowly and only with people who prove they deserve it. There's more, she says quietly. More what? More bodies. Tommy found evidence of other accidents that weren't accidents. Going back to the 1950s, Morrison's expression darkens. The scope of the Hendricks family's crimes is expanding beyond even her worst expectations, revealing a pattern of violence that spans generations. How many more? Tommy wasn't sure. Maybe 20. Maybe 30. Robert slumps against his sedan, the weight of truth finally breaking his will to resist. His empire is not just falling, it is being revealed as a monument to murder, built on a foundation of unmarked graves. My grandfather did what he had to do to protect this county's economy. Your grandfather was a killer, Sarah replies, and your family has been covering for him ever since. Morrison signals for additional units, knowing that she will need all the help she can get to process a crime scene that spans multiple decades and involves some of the most powerful people in the county. Mr. Hendricks, you're under arrest. The words hang in the morning air like a judgment 50 years in the making. Robert Hendricks, the most powerful man in the county, is about to discover what powerlessness feels like. Sarah watches as handcuffs click around Robert's wrists as Miranda rights are read to a man who thought himself above all law. Justice has finally come to a place where it was absent for too long. In the distance, an ambulance approaches to treat Marcus. But no medical attention can heal the wounds his family has inflicted on this county for 3 generations. The voices from the dark are finally being heard. 3 hours later, the Hendricks men are gone, loaded into state police cars, along with boxes of evidence that will bury their family's empire forever. The yard feels empty without their presence, quieter than it has been in weeks. Sarah stands beside Detective Morrison's cruiser, watching the last of the official vehicles disappear down the main road in clouds of dust. Detective Morrison finishes taking Sarah's statement on the hood of her cruiser, her pen moving across official forms with the methodical precision of someone who has done this too many times. The paperwork is thick, dense with details that will become testimony, evidence, the foundation of prosecutions that will stretch for years. We'll need you available for testimony. I won't be here. Morrison looks up from her clipboard, studying Sarah's face for signs that she's joking. She finds none. Sarah's expression carries the finality of a decision made in blood and grief, unchangeable as the mountains that surround this valley. Mrs. Crowley, Sarah, and I mean it. Soon as this is over, I'm gone. Morrison sets down her pen and leans against the cruiser. She has seen enough victims to recognize the signs of someone who has given everything they have to give. Sarah Crowley fought her war and won. But victory has a price that not everyone is willing to pay. Where will you go? Does it matter? For the record, yes. Sarah looks toward the mountains where she spent 3 days hiding, where she learned that survival sometimes means becoming something harder than what you were before. The peaks rise like broken teeth against the sky, indifferent to human suffering, but somehow comforting in their permanence. Tell the record I'll be wherever the wind takes me. Morrison nods and makes a note on her form. She understands that some people cannot stay in places where ghosts outnumber the living, where every familiar landmark carries the weight of trauma too heavy to bear. If you change your mind, I won't. Morrison closes her clipboard and extends her hand. Sarah shakes it, feeling the calluses of another woman who has fought battles in a world that prefers its women quiet and compliant. Thank you, Sarah, for Tommy, for the families, for all of it. Thank you for listening. Morrison climbs into her cruiser and drives away, leaving Sarah alone in the yard where 50 years of lies finally came undone. The silence feels different now, cleaned of secrets and weighted with possibility instead of dread. Dalton approaches from where he has been standing by his own vehicle, waiting for his moment to speak. He looks older than he did this morning, worn down by decades of compromise finally ended. The badge on his chest catches sunlight, but it no longer seems to carry the authority it held at dawn. "Thank you," Sarah says. For what? Choosing right when it mattered. Dalton removes his hat and runs a hand through gray hair that has thinned with the stress of carrying other people's secrets. His face shows every one of his 53 years, etched with lines that speak of sleepless nights and moral compromises that never sat easy. Should have chosen right 50 years ago. "You were just a deputy then. Old enough to know better." Sarah studies his face, seeing something she recognizes, guilt that no amount of justice can wash away, the knowledge that good choices made too late still leave scars on the soul. 50 years is a long time to carry someone else's sins. They became my sins the day I chose to look away. Sarah walks to the shed and begins loading her truck with the few things that matter. Tommy's rifle goes first, wrapped in an old blanket and secured behind the driver's seat. Her tools follow, the knives and needles and stretchers that have fed her for 30 years. Last comes a photograph of their wedding day. Tommy young and grinning beside a woman who still believed the world was fundamentally fair. "You really leaving?" Dalton's question carries genuine surprise. In his experience, people fight for justice so they can stay and enjoy it, not so they can run away from the aftermath. "Nothing left for me here." Could be. After the trials, after people know the truth. Truth doesn't bring back the dead, brings peace to the living. Sarah pauses in her packing, a box of ammunition halfway to the truck bed. She can feel Tommy's presence in the shed, stronger now than it has been since his funeral, not haunting her, but blessing her, giving her permission to leave, to carry their story somewhere new. Brings peace to some of the living. And to others? Others need to find their peace somewhere else. From inside the shed, she can hear Tommy's voice, not the recorder this time, but memory. Their last morning together, when he kissed her goodbye and promised to be home for dinner. When the world still made sense and love felt like enough to protect them from whatever darkness lived in the mountains. Tommy always said I was too stubborn to stay in one place long. "Where will you go?" Sarah closes the truck's tailgate and checks the straps holding her possessions in place. Everything she owns fits in the bed of a 20-year-old pickup truck. Everything that matters anyway. North, maybe. Or west. Somewhere the mountains don't remember what happened in the valleys. She climbs into the truck and starts the engine. The motor turns over smooth and reliable, the sound of machinery that has been maintained by hands that understand the importance of being ready to leave. Through the windshield, she can see the mine shaft in the distance, soon to be reopened by investigators, its secrets finally exposed to sunlight. "Sarah," she rolls down the window, feeling the cool air flow into the cab. The truck idles with the patient rumble of an engine ready for long roads and distant horizons. "If you ever change your mind about staying, I won't." The certainty in her voice surprises even her. But some decisions once made become part of who you are. Sarah Crowley is leaving, and the woman who drives away will not be the same one who fought this battle. "Take care of yourself, Bill." "You too, Sarah." The truck pulls away from the shed, leaving behind the only home she has known for 15 years. In the rearview mirror, she watches Dalton grow smaller until he disappears entirely, becoming just another memory in a place that holds too many of them. By evening, she has crossed the county line, driving through territory that doesn't know her name or her story. The sun sets behind her, painting the sky the color of forge fire and fresh blood. Ahead, darkness gathers on roads that lead anywhere she chooses to follow them. By morning, she will be a name in someone else's story, carrying Tommy's truth wherever the road leads her. She will become legend in the county she leaves behind. The fur cleaner who vanished after bringing down the most powerful family in the mountains. But this time, she is not running from the truth. She is carrying it with her, like seeds that will grow wherever she chooses to plant them. The wind that takes her carries whispers of justice, and somewhere in the darkness ahead, 12 families are finally free to mourn their dead. The fur cleaner vanishes again, but this time, she's not running from the truth. She's carrying it with her.